back to the Greens and Grace podcast. We have had a great show so far. I've been really enjoying our new format, Ryan. This has been a
Oh,
lot of fun.
yeah, absolutely. I think, 25 episodes into it, maybe we're starting to find a groove.
It's exciting. It's exciting, and we're still growing the Greens and Grace community. And we're having lots of fun, and so this is the final segment of our show today, and we're going to be talking about. Um, we're going to start a series on the Sermon on the Mount. I want to
Yeah.
encourage everybody to read Matthew chapter 5 and Luke chapter 6. Not, I think I can't remember where it picks up in Luke chapter 6, but both are versions of Sermon on the Mount. Well, we call them Sermon on the Mount, but that name actually comes from Matthew, and so they both give Beatitudes, but they're both, I would contend, two separate sermons. We've talked about this before, Ryan, that there are people who would want to discredit some of the Bible, and they use different arguments. And one of the things they say is, see, this is contradictory, these don't line up. For instance, the Sermon on the Mount at the beginning says Jesus took them up to a mountainside, and this is the Sermon on the Mount. And see how it's different in Luke, because they come down by the sea and they stand on a level ground. Well, I have always contended that you know Jesus was a traveling preacher, and I'm willing to make a bet, just like preachers do now, evangelists do now. They have a similar sermon, and they go around and preach us the same sermon quite a few times. I mean, the Beatitudes contain so much of Jesus's message, but I think what we read when we read the account according to Matthew and the account according to Luke, I think we're reading two different times Jesus gave this sermon. And so, what the a person that would be attacking the biblical account, I think that they're not really thinking correctly in that regard. What are your thoughts on
I would agree wholeheartedly with it. Wow. I just had my audio is like sounding rattly in the background. How are you? We can edit all that part out, but I sounded like I had a gargoyle in my headphones for a minute there. Hopefully that's all fine.
that?
Yeah, I definitely think there's plenty of evidence to show that those were two separate situations and not some sort of error in the writings going on there. Also, in that Luke account we were discussing in the past as well, there's not just the Beatitudes or the blessings portion, but later on for that one, he goes into woes. So there's blessings and woes combined. So
Yeah,
it's sort of a different sermon for possibly a very different audience, and why he was chose what he preached about at that time.
exactly. And I think as we do this, I think as we do this series, we should do the Matthew portion, but I think we should bring in the Luke portion as well
Yeah, absolutely.
as we do it. But having said that, was there something in the and again, I want to encourage everybody to read it. We're going to try not get bogged down by just reading, passages, on this show, but really just try to pick out some specific passages that we want to comment on. And Ryan, was there anything about the beginning portion of Matthew? We're going to be really focusing in on Matthew 5 verses 1 through 12. So was there anything in there that really sticks out to you that you want to discuss?
Just man, what a way to start his big sermon. I mean, we've talked about it in the past. Jesus had performed some miracles. He had interactions with individuals. He had been teaching in synagogues. He was known, but this was like the really first big event for him where people were gathering around. It's when he really went from just a kind of a name a few people knew about to a common name in what he was doing. So, and he starts out immediately, it's just with blessings. And I think that's great because it gives comfort to a largely Jewish crowd who was needing comfort at that time. They were feeling plenty of oppression, and they had throughout the entire history of the Israelite people felt oppression, and they're waiting for this savior. They're waiting for some kind of comfort. So he immediately starts out not laying into them, not you know, giving here's what you shouldn't be doing. He's immediately going in and giving them blessings. So blessed are people who are poor in spirit, blessed are people who are mourning, blessed are the meek. I mean, that would have opened up ears, I think, immediately going into that.
Don't you think that when he's saying this, these are people, I mean, blessed are the poor in spirit. And Luke, it says, blessed are the poor. I mean, it goes just straight into material issues, but blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are the meek. You're right. They were under Roman oppression at the time. And these are people that were under the thumbs of an aristocracy as well. I don't know if it was an aristocracy. Yeah, they had aristocracy. It was an aristocracy. And they just, for most of them, for peasants, especially at that time, probably many of them were peasants that Jesus was talking to. They had no real chance for some other kind of life. I mean, I think we take for granted in this country that you can start at the bottom and work your way up anywhere. I mean, you can start at a company here at sweeping floors and be the CEO in 10 years. It's happened. It happens still. I know of a company that I actually know of that happened at, and I think people take that for granted. That kind of mobility didn't exist. And so you're right to point that out, that Jesus is coming to these people who are really just like, man, downtrodden, but he's bringing this word of encouragement. And I would go so far as to say it's based in his outlook on resurrection and the world to come, like we say in the creed, the Nicene Creed. We believe in the resurrection of the world to come. It is that hope that even when everything seems hopeless in this world, we have the hope of the resurrection and the world to come.
Yeah, I agree. I really love that old future tense thing, because let's just look at the first part. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. That's not an immediate thing. It's not immediate. It's not, you aren't getting this now, but the kingdom of heaven is yours. There are better things coming. He's not promising immediate justice at this moment. He is letting them know that there is something better coming. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. They will be comforted. It's future tense. It seems like comfort is coming, but he's not promising everything's going to be fine right now. You aren't going to feel sad right now. You aren't going to, he's giving an indication of things to come, and obviously announcing that he has a huge part in that.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think like Paul kind of echoes this when he says, "Where is thy victory, O death? Where is thy sting?" Because of this resurrection outlook, this hope to know God, to experience God, and to know that there's this resurrection, this hope. Where's your sting, death? Where's your victory? It doesn't bother me anymore. It doesn't hurt me anymore. And so all these people that are well fed, that are taken care of, they're fine, right, in life. But you know what they have in the back of their head if they don't have God? They've always got that the party's over, the party's coming to an end, and so they never really enjoy this life. But when we have that focus of God, when we are centered on God, I mean, it's like I've always said, heaven starts now. It doesn't start when you die. It starts right now. When you have God in your life, heaven starts right now. And so, but you're right. You're still going to experience the pains and their miseries. And yeah, Jesus, he really does have a future oriented way of saying.
Yep. I always look at verse 6, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, because that would have been, a defining characteristic of the people he was talking to. They want righteousness. They want something right to happen. They want right standing. It's not just their own personal, but they want righteousness in the world. They want a certain degree of justice. And he's saying, you will be filled. You're going to get what you've been promised.
Yeah, it's yeah, he's making promises. And yeah, I really like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um I like to talk about a little bit about um the blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Do you
Mm.
you know we did a whole series on the Lord's Prayer, and we came to that part in the Lord's Prayer. It says, "Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us." And the thought that we had talked about was, what if God really does forgive us the way we forgive others? That's kind of scary.
It's a
And
super scary thought.
yeah, and to say, blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Well, what happens to the people that aren't merciful? Will they be shown any mercy? And I think it goes back to this idea that I can't hold unforgiveness in my hands and receive forgiveness. You have to let go of the one to receive the other.
Yeah.
You can only hold one thing in your hand,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And so I think that's kind of the image, that it's not that God can't show you mercy, it's that you're unable to receive God's mercy, not on account of God's inability to give it, but on your inability to take and receive it, because your hands are full of unforgiveness. You're still holding on the mercy that you could be giving others.
Yeah, that's the key right there. Because
Yeah,
God's mercy is infinite, it's overflowing. His love and his grace for us knows no bounds. But our sin sure knows bounds. Our ability to hold on to grudges and to not be merciful and to hold on to our sin in our lives absolutely can cause that divide between us and the mercy that God wants to give so generously to us.
yeah. And that holding on is like a cancer to
Hmm.
our souls. I mean, I've struggled. I think everybody struggled with having trouble forgiving someone or having mercy for someone. And I tell you, when you finally have that, like, this person doesn't owe me anything. I don't. I'm over this. I forgive this person. It is so freeing. You know. Um, I always liken God's grace. Um, there was once somebody, I think Dietrich Bonhoeffer said that he was chastising the church for cheap grace, and I get what he was saying there, and I understand what he was trying to say, and I don't think he would. I'm not disagreeing with him per se, but I also don't want people to think grace costs something. It costs God something,
Yep.
but cheap grace, yeah, that's all I can afford, right? I can't afford anything more than that, because there's nothing in me that can receive it or earn it. And so God's not the problem. It's not God's problem if we're unable to receive forgiveness or mercy. It's not that God hasn't done anything to make it happen.
No,
The
he's not
problem,
he's not being petty. He's not being vindictive. He's like, oh, well, if you aren't going to show mercy to them, I'm not going to show it to you. It's
yeah,
that you are the one limiting yourself. I'm not limiting you. You are the
yeah,
one putting these limitations in place.
yeah. It's kind of like, it's yes, that's exactly it. It's like, Ryan, how much grace from God do you want?
I want it all,
So
John.
it's up to you. You can go into the vault and take as much as you want out.
Mm-hmm.
So how much do you want? And that's what God's saying, I think, with his mercy and grace, saying, how much do you want? You can go into the vault. God's given you access. But the thing is, to take anything out, you're going to have empty hands to do it.
Yep.
You got to go in and have empty hands to be able to take grace. So you're going to have to let go of whatever it is you're holding on to
Yep.
take hold of God's grace.
And his preference is all of it. He wants us to give it all to him. I
Yeah.
mean, it's not just things like not giving mercy to it, it's every aspect, which, man, thank God that his mercy is so infinite, because the idea of letting go of all those things, it's impossible, and it's scary to think of trying to do things on our own in this world. Like it,
Yeah, I agree. Was
um,
there anything else in this section that really stuck out to you?
I'll tell you one that I think kind of closes out, until, unless you have something else. It's verse 11, because I've seen this used in a modern context, and I kind of want to know what we think he was trying to say at that time. So, 11 is, "Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, or because great is your reward in heaven, for in the same way they persecute the prophets who were before you." I've seen it used in modern ones because a lot of Christians have persecution like fever, like we're always being persecuted. It's everywhere. Everyone's out against us. And I see that verse a lot for comforting modern day Christians, like, oh, you're blessed when people are persecuting. But he wasn't saying that, depending on how you want to read the Bible. I'm one to believe that he was speaking truth to those people, and we shouldn't get too far in applying that to our modern lives in that way. But why were people being persecuted back then? Do you think it was the same reasons as we're feeling persecution today? Do you think it's right when Christians use that section of scripture to talk about our current struggles?
Wow. Okay. Well, first of all, I'd say that Jesus is making a prediction. He's kind of letting them know in his kind of cryptic way that he sometimes does that a persecution is coming,
Mm-hmm.
which would come because Nero blamed the Christians for a fire that Nero started, and which would cause people to turn against the Christians. The Romans wouldn't have just naturally persecuted the Christians, right? Paganism at that time was pretty open to like anything,
Yeah.
like, oh, cool. I think we talked about this on another podcast. I think one of the reasons, like Paul, for instance, was able to convert so many Gentiles quickly is for them, it was natural to like, oh, a new God, let's hear about it. Cool.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I really like this. Yeah, I'm going to incorporate this into my beliefs. And then Paul would eventually have to start bringing the hammer down. Like, yeah, now you've incorporated this in your beliefs. You need to start getting rid of this out of your beliefs. This is false. And look at the power that, like he writes, look at the power God's been working among you. Is that the Holy Spirit that did that? Or is that these other, garbage gods? No, it's the Holy Spirit because it's real. So let's get rid of this garbage over here. So the pagans, there was, I think that, for instance, persecution of the church has been overinflated. There was, I think I read somewhere by a historian that in reality, there was probably combined a total of 13 years total that the Christians would have been persecuted during for like a two or for like a 300-year period. 13 of those years were maybe persecution, and only a couple of those were really bad. So on the flip side, of course, Christians would take over and a hierarchy and power structures and things like that, and eventually they were persecutors. So we need to also be humble about history here. But I think that with today, the way Christians sometimes act about persecution, I think it makes us sound like a bunch of whiny babies. And I get really annoyed with that because Christians are not being persecuted in this country. I know that that's going to strike people as odd, but Christians have so much freedom in this country. I think if anything, Christians have probably done more to persecute others in this country, for right or wrong. Definitely wrong. We shouldn't be the persecutors. We should be the shining light, the city on a hill, the place that people want to take refuge in. You know, um, it's okay to have moral standards and be against things and stand up for those things. But just because the world doesn't agree with you doesn't mean you're being persecuted. And I don't think that's what Jesus was talking about. I think Jesus is saying, because there's this persecution that's going to be coming, and he's saying, you're going to be insulted. Or, like we've talked about, he's talking to, there's probably a Jewish audience here. Just that alone, as um, it began to push against the Christian message, began to push against Judaism at the time, with the old covenant and the old temple would eventually be destroyed. This really hardened a lot of Israel against any other message. They really turned to the rabbinic Judaism at that point, and they really felt like, you know, uh, they didn't want to make God mad anymore, and they were not receptive to the idea that Jesus is the Son of God, that the Messiah came in human form and was both God and man. Like, that was repulsive to a lot of Jews. So I think that'd be my take on it. I mean, what do you think?
Well, and I completely agree with it because there's something, I don't know. Today it seems like we see persecution as having, like you said, differing opinions. We see as persecution. Someone who doesn't automatically ascribe to what we believe in as persecution, or legislation that we don't like is persecution against all of us, or the wrong book in the school library is persecution.
Right.
And I just don't think we really know what persecution means. I don't know, maybe with all the freedoms that we have in America, that we become a little bit disjointed, or we don't really know what it means to feel
Yeah, I
persecuted.
think it's weird for this country because so many countries have been built around. I mean, we were like a first in the world to have a completely secular government, right? Where it was like you had separation of church and state. A person was free to explore whatever religion they wanted, or no religion at all, and the state wasn't going to provide any income to a church, right? So, like in England, the Church of England still gets money from taxes, right? And I think there's some other countries that are the same way. And um, we were something new. We were something different. And I think a lot of people struggle to figure that out. Like, when it comes to a public library, you know, uh, I think Kirk Cameron's trying to get a book in there right now, and it's like, oh, he's being persecuted because he's Christian, or maybe it's just not a good book. I mean,
Yeah.
or maybe there's no place for that because I don't know. I mean, who knows? But just jumping on the persecution train, I mean, if his book writing is anything like his acting, it's probably not a good book. I'm sorry,
Oh, come on, Growing Pains was good, man.
but yeah, Growing Pains was good when he left the show. Right?
Oh, was that the show with the guy who he had the friend whose name was Boner?
Yeah,
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 good show.
uh, yeah. But there is that person. They have this persecution. Um, what's the word I'm looking for? Personification. They're not personification, but like where it's in their head. This
Persecution delusion.
delusion. Yeah, I mean, I don't think Christians are being persecuted in this country. Now, you could make cases for other things, like if a Christian is truly against certain things, and there's been lots of times like this, what are they required to do by law? Say in the case of a business or something, and something they disagree with, honestly, it's a religious
Well,
position.
there's the old story of it's probably 15, 20 years old, of the bakery, I think in New York, who
Yeah,
refused to make a cake for a homosexual couple's wedding. And they saw it as persecution, that if they were being persecuted, that people thought they had to go against their beliefs to make that cake.
yeah,
And I don't know, and like your bakery, if you're choosing a small percentage of the population and saying, I will do something for everyone except for you, it almost seems like it's more persecution on the Christian baker's part than it is on the people saying they should do their job as a baker.
And see, this is where I struggle with this whole thing because I'd say I'm a more of a I like the free market, and I like more libertarian ideas in that. So, me, I'm like, let a business do what it wants. Number one, as far as if it wants to sell or not sell, you know, for instance, when with the civil rights stuff that happened, if I'm a business owner, I don't care what color your skin is. I'm going to sell to you. I like the color green. I'm a business owner. I want money, right? And that's what a business owner should be for, is profit, and it's beholden to its shareholders if it's a bigger company. If a business doesn't want to sell, then I don't know. I guess I don't see a problem with that. But especially if it violates, Hobby Lobby. I mean, there's stuff there too. Or should they be forced to? I think they're against uh, uh, a certain kind of birth control
Yeah.
that they didn't want involved in their insurance policies. Should they be forced to do that? I mean, I don't know. I don't think. I mean, if somebody's going to Hobby Lobby, they know what they're getting.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to work at Hobby Lobby, you know the deal. I don't understand why people are going to these places, and then I'm wondering why people are. It's their business. It's they can also have dress codes, and they can also say, hey, we don't like you to wear beards,
Mm-hmm.
and we want you to wear this flare on our suspenders. Is that persecution
Yeah.
because they're making you do that? I mean,
The problem with the Hobby Lobby one, I've had a lot of thought and a lot of back and forth on this one.
uh-huh.
No business can say we're only going to hire Christians. That's not good business practice. You can't say that you must be a Christian to work here. So on the flip side, I don't know. I think the question is, can they, as the owners, I get that they don't want their insurance associated with those contraceptives, but then they're also saying that to work for us, you have to ascribe by our values. So it's not just their values that are being, you know, in question when these lawsuits and legislation come up. It's, well, are you saying that then we're forcing our employees to have the same views as us too? Because I'm sure a lot of people use contraceptives and birth control and other forms of, you know, medications that they need work at Hobby Lobby, but then I don't, it's a weird slippery slope. I'll tell you one
Well,
thing, Sean.
and that's my thing is it's a slippery slope, and when you start telling businesses, you have to operate government when government starts telling businesses how they need to operate, and it's not actually for protecting, like when they put certain EPA guidelines out, that's protecting everybody, right? And so a lot of that makes sense. Or certain OSHA rules, making sure that a business has to treat workers a certain way, that so that they're not putting them at risk for injury, that they're providing the safety materials necessary. And that's just a general welfare. Like that makes sense to me. I get that.
Yeah.
But telling a business that, because this baker, he's more like a sole proprietor, it sounds like he was the one making the cakes, and he doesn't want to make a cake for a gay couple. And I guess I mean, I don't know what I would do in that situation. I don't really care. I mean, I'll make a cake for them. Who cares? It's money. I'm there to make money. I'm in business to make money, you know. But he felt weird about being complicit with that. And so why not allow people to have certain convictions? I mean, it's their business. I get worried when government starts wanting to tell businesses you have to operate this way or that. That kind of scares me.
Yeah. I guess on the flip side, if I were a baker and the Ku Klux Klan came to me and needed like 1,000 cupcakes for their annual Klan jamboree, I would not want to make Ku Klux Klan cupcakes.
Right. I'm not interested in making Ku Klux Klan cupcakes.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a perfect example. I'm not interested in um, being a baker. If the Charles Manson came into my bakery, get the hell out, dude. I'm not interested in serving you. Am I persecuting him? Or is it, you know what I mean? It's like, I think a business owner needs the ability to choose that, right? To have that ability to say, I'm not serving this or serving that. And the fact of the matter is this, is that we saw lots of times where it was the reverse situation where, certain individuals were asked to leave restaurants because they were of a more conservative ilk. So, why was that not, if the one's wrong, how come the other? And I think that this is getting into the weeds, but I don't think Christians are being persecuted. But what I think has happened is we are wrapped up in a big political war in this country right now. And which is unfortunate because nobody's talking to each other. Nobody's trying to even have a rational discussion here. And everybody's saying they're persecuted. Everybody's saying they're persecuted. It's not just Christians saying they're persecuted.
Mm-hmm.
It's the woke left that's being persecuted too. Everybody's being persecuted. And I hate it all because it all has this like victim mentality that I just find sad and pathetic. It's like, man, no, it's just like what we talk about in the news story. We're supposed to have this like attitude of like winning.
Mm-hmm.
We are strong, we're courageous, we win. We're not victims. We're not going to lay down and be victims. We're going to win. We're going to be strong. We're going to overcome things. We're going to overcome challenges. That's the life God called us to, right? Is that, am I crazy for thinking that? Or
no, he didn't call us to live lives of victimhood, and I think that's an awesome way to end it. Since I'm getting a little ticker on our screen that we've almost filled another 40 minutes up, John.
Oh my gosh, it's gonna be the longest podcast ever. Well, we hope everybody liked today. So we really appreciate everybody. And this is the Grains and Grace podcast.